what does the ripple effect mean to you?
I would say it's everything to me. And then I left, and of course, it hit me, and I collapsed to the ground. And there's all these security guards around me. They're like, "We have a 911 situation." I was fine. And anyway,
All right, guys. I am very excited for this next guest. Molly Carroll is someone that we featured in our Connect and Grow Ripple coaching program for our TED Ripple. And for those of you that don't know what that is, the Connect and Grow coaching program is a 12-month membership program that we create and have these special events for our Ripplers that really want to take a deeper dive into our theme for the month, topic of connection, and really making Ripple part of their ongoing philosophy for being a better person, building a better business, better team, better organization, better relationships with their employees, their prospects, their clients, wherever they come from. And we do these things called TED Ripples. And I had seen Molly's talk um, probably about 2 years ago, and it was earmarked as one of my favorites. The need for human connection and why it starts with ourselves. You know, this is going to resonate with me because that is right up my alley. And so we did the talk. We got great response and feedback. In fact, it kicked off a couple of conversations for people that couldn't make the live call that really took what she had to say to heart. And I just was so enamored with it that I had to reach out to her and say, "Hey, if your ears were burning on this particular day, it was my fault." And that kicked off this whole series of back and forth conversations about the possibility of her coming and joining the podcast. We had this great interaction. We learned that she's actually doing some work with companies that I know, and specifically one organization in Austin that I did training for early on, and we just had this great back and forth interaction. She's the author of two books. She has a great podcast called Cracking Open, which is based on one of her books. She is a licensed therapist, a coach, a keynote speaker. She is a dynamo, and I can't wait for you guys to meet her. Guys, I am super excited to introduce you to Molly Carroll. I am a huge fan and have become an even huger fan since I got an opportunity to actually meet you directly, Molly, and have a conversation about getting you on the podcast and talking to you about all the things that we're doing in our Ripple community. But I want to thank you for being here for the Ripple Effect podcast. How are you doing?
good. Thank you for having me. I'm doing well.
Well, I have to kick off with a question, which is maybe more of a question for me, but I'm going to let you answer it. But the question is, how did I get so lucky to get you here today? I mean, you are an
No.
absolute rock star, and I am so grateful that you were even open to coming on the show. But thank you so much for being here. But I am really really pumped to have you, and I'm just curious if you could share just real quickly, like kind of how we came together for this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I made a promise to myself. I met Richard Blanco one time. He was the poet who said a poem at Barack Obama's inauguration, and he was so sweet. And after I met him, I sent him my one of my books, and he wrote me a postcard back. And he didn't need to do that. And I reminded myself that I'm going to have the same courtesy to people. When people reach out to me, I am going to respond to them, or even if as a therapist, if someone calls me, even if I can't take them on because I don't see private clients anymore, I'll call them back within 24 hours and just so when you wrote me, and I really love your name, the ripple effect. I think that's hugely important in my life, whether you want to call it ripple or synchronicity or deep human connection, which is my passion. Was curious, and so you're incredibly kind and warm, and so it's my pleasure to support you in your community in whatever way I can.
Well, I am so appreciative to that. And I appreciate the fact that you shared that because you did tell me when we actually got on the phone about that postcard and how much it meant to you. And it meant a lot to me because, as my audience knows from the introduction, we had featured your TED Talk for
Mm,
our community. And we do these things called the TED Ripples where we'll actually feature a talk and then we just have a conversation around it. And we've been doing this for well over 2 years. And I love it because it's amazing to hear everybody's perspective and what they take away from it. But a lot of times our community can't be there for the live talk. It usually is a lot of people catch the replay and then they'll reach out either through the comments or they'll reach out to me directly and say just how much they appreciated the actual speaker that I sort of gave, the stage to for this
Mhm.
session. And yours just like was off the charts positive because it was such a
Mhm.
phenomenal talk. And so when I reached out to you and said, "Hey, if your ears were burning on this particular day with me," I wanted
Yeah.
you to know that your work just continues to resonate and is still continuing to ripple out there in the world.
Oh, well, thank you for saying that. I appreciate it. I appreciate it a
Well,
lot.
of course. And I'm excited to have you. I've got so many questions and so many different ways that I want to take this conversation, but I have to start with being on your website. I saw you met the Dalai Lama. I've never talked to anybody that's ever met the Dalai Lama. Can you just tell me about that experience?
Yeah, what a great place to start.
Not to
Yes,
set the bar too high, right?
no, it's an incredible story. It's an incredible story. I one evening was watching a documentary on Netflix called The 10 Questions to Ask the Dalai Lama. And it's a documentary about an American journalist who was going over to Dharamsala to recover His Holiness's teachings and realized that he was going to get a private audience, but he had only had time to ask the Dalai Lama 10 questions. And what would he ask him in that time? And so in the middle of the documentary, I just got chills all over my body. I like got a little bit of shakiness. And out of nowhere, I was like, I have to go to India and help Tibetan refugees. Now, mind you, I meditated, I did yoga, I was a therapist, I'd read a lot of books, but I was not deeply into Tibet, helping Tibetan refugees or what was going on with China. I had no political or, sort of interest in that area at that time, or even the Dalai Lama. I'd read books about him, but I knew in that moment I had to go. And so my husband came downstairs and I said, I think I got to go to India to help the Dalai Lama. And he knew who he married. So he was like, oh my gosh, here we go. So I started the process. I booked my ticket. I got my visa. I organized with an incredible organization called La in Dharamsala to work with Tibetan refugees. And I was on my way to go to India. And suddenly my father passed away. My father
Oh,
died. He was ill, but we didn't know he was going to die as soon as he did. And he passed away. And I was so stricken by grief. I could not go to India. Now, backing up a
oh,
little bit, when I first was planning my trip and raising money and doing everything, I actually wrote www.dalailama.com. And I wrote them and said, I'm coming to India to help Tibetan refugees. Is there any way I can meet the Dalai Lama? Because I was like, if this journalist met the Dalai Lama, I probably could too. And they wrote me
yeah.
back, no. There's 70, he's 80, 70, 80, it was 70 at the time. There's hundreds of thousands of people who reach out to us. So no. So anyway, going back, fast forwarding a little bit. Yes, my father passed away and I was so stricken by grief. I just could barely get out of bed. I was young. I was 39 years old, let alone go to India. And I was going by myself, leaving my
Yeah.
children and my husband for this journey. And so I canceled my whole trip. And a year passed, and I was on a hike with a really good friend. And she looked at me and she's like, when are you going to India? You raised all that money. You should go. And I kind of got a little upset. I was like, it's not that easy to just pick up and go to India. I had a full private practice, 40 clients. I was a mom of two young kids. And she said, that's total. Can I curse on this? I don't know if I can say a bad word. It's total
Yeah,
bullshit.
sure.
That's what she said.
Yeah,
Okay, I didn't
of
know if I could
course.
curse. It's a total, you can beep that out. It's a total lie. You could do anything you want. If you wanted to go tomorrow, you could. You could. And I got home from the hike and I was like, she is right.
Wow.
And I rebooked my ticket and I left 3 weeks later. In 3 weeks. And in that time, the night before I was leaving, I was like, I remember that man Tenzin from www.dalailama.com. And I wrote him and I said, you probably don't remember me. I was coming a year ago to work with the Tibetan refugees. And now I can't, I'm deciding to come. Is there any way I could get a private audience with His Holiness? And he said, when you arrive, come find me. So I got to India and I got to Dharamsala, which was a whole nother journey because I had to fly into Pakistan by myself as a white woman.
Mm.
Because of the Himalayan mountains, we couldn't land in Dharamsala. Anyway, and I went to His Holiness's home. It's open, kind of in a way, if anyone's ever been there. Um, and you go to the main office, and they said, "Well, we'll be in touch with you." And I went back again, and they slid me a piece of paper that said, "Your audience is 11 a.m. on Wednesday, but you cannot tell anyone because people will follow you, and people will stalk you." and that whole thing. Well, I did tell my mother, but and no, I didn't tell anyone else. And so there's a whole story, more of a story of it in my book, which I won't go into every single detail, and trust within my second book that you can read. But basically, I arrived and you stand in a line. There's maybe 6 or 8 of us, like separate people. And His Holiness comes out, and the man who I emailed just out of a grace of God, I don't know how I got him, was his actual personal secretary.
Wow.
And that's why I got a private audience. And Tenzin came up to me and he said, Molly, I'm Tenzin. And I just said, oh my gosh, how do I meet you? And then he led me up to His Holiness and we held hands. And the first thing he said to me was, how old was your father when he passed away? And I said,
Oh,
70. And he kept like looking up, like, oh, like as if he was talking to him. And we literally stood there in silence for like 5 minutes. And I kind of lost consciousness. Like you're in another world. You're in an absolutely another world. You can say whether if you met the Pope or you met a Muhammad or, in any enlightened being, there's a different level of consciousness. There's a different level
yeah.
of vibration when you're sitting with them.
Yeah.
And so finally, like my consciousness came back in, and it was probably 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And I turned to him and I said, Your Holiness, you probably have things to do. You probably have things to do. And something so unprofound, like everyone in America loves you. I mean, I said something not enlightened at all. And he just turned to me and just said, No, no, my time is with you. I'm with you. No hurry. And then people took pictures of us and we just stood there in silence together and held hands.
Oh.
And then I left and of course it hit me and I collapsed to the ground and there's all these security guards around me. They're like, we have a 911 situation. And I was crying. And anyway, so yeah, so that was my journey with His Holiness. And it's just
My gosh. I mean,
and then one
just the ripples that happened there, right? Your friends, what a gift. You having the courage to say, "You're right, let me go," and then to have followed up on the conversation that you had previously when you got told no, to say, "Hey, I'm still coming, and I'd still love that audience," and for you to ripple to the right person that could actually make that happen. I mean, we should just drop the mic right now. This show is over. I mean, oh my gosh, I had no idea. That's incredible.
Well, the one question people always ask me about it when they hear about the stories, what did you learn from that experience? And what I learned is this, and talk about ripples. We are so much more connected than we know. We
Yeah.
are all connected. It doesn't matter about your gender or your color of skin or how much money you have in the bank account or where you live in the world. Every single person on this planet you are connected to. If I could meet the Dalai Lama, and I could have a private audience with His Holiness out of no reason than just divine intervention, call it what you want, synchronicity, luck.
Yeah.
Um, anyone can have a connection to another human being.
Oh my gosh, that just gave me chills. I mean, and I feel like I had that with you when I talked to you. I smiled the rest of the afternoon after our call
Mm.
because I just and now it just reaffirms like why I'm so grateful that you're here today. And thank you for sharing that. That was a true gift to all of our Ripplers. Let me ask you. So November 2019, you're
Mhm.
about to jump on the TED stage and give a talk, The Need for Human Connection and Why It Starts with Ourselves, which, by the way, that title totally got me. And that's why I've loved it
Mm.
since I first saw it. What's going through your mind in the moment before you take the stage?
Oh my gosh. I've never been asked it that way, so I'm gonna be as honest as I can. It's
Yeah.
something really crazy. So sadly, my father had passed, and my mother had a really horrible cancer. She had pancreatic
Oh,
cancer. And I'm sitting in the audience. So you sit in the audience before you like your time, you go up. So I'm sitting in the audience and my phone is going off, but I can tell my siblings are keeping something from me because they know I'm going
mm,
on my TED stage.
yeah.
But I knew something was going on with my mother. So to be honest, what was going on is complete nerves, total stress for going on the TED stage, but also a deep, deep heart, like knowing that something bigger is happening than
Yeah.
me and my TED talk. And it was about my mother. So there's something about that happens when we think outside of ourselves. And I'm good friends with a man named Sunil Gupta who wrote an amazing book called The Everyday Dharma. And he talks about the spotlight effect. And when you're about ready to get on stage, can you turn the spotlight on someone else beside yourself? Now, I didn't have that knowledge when I did it, but I do think there was something deeper in me thinking about my mom when I was getting on that stage than myself, although it's impossible to not be nervous. But yeah, so I was thinking, and I'm just trying my best to, knowing that I already had the experience with the Dalai Lama, and knowing as a therapist and a mom and a human being the power of human connection, to think about how can I connect with everyone in this audience, to know they're loved, to know they're seen, to know they're going to be okay. I tried my best to stay in that essence
Yep.
versus the fear of, am I going to mess up? Am I going to be okay? Which definitely those voices came in, but I tried my best to kind of step back and do the spotlight effect.
I love it. You know what? One of the things that one of our Ripplers actually said about your talk in comparison to others that we've had is that it felt like you were talking to a sibling or a good friend, and that you
Mm,
were just speaking. And so that, I mean, that's the note of a gifted speaker, which you are anyway. But on that TED stage, when there is this pomp and circumstance around that event, and people try to go a certain way for those talks, and it's a limited window, right? So you have a limited chance to make an impact on your audience. But it really stuck with me that's how they framed it, because it's how I felt, but I hadn't put it into words. And it
mm,
really felt like everybody in that room just kind of washed away or on the call with us that day, and it was just as if you were speaking to us as individuals. So
mm,
you continue to just really inspire me with that presentation approach, and that to now know kind of the backstory about what you were dealing with at that time. I could It's weird because I felt like there was a sense of something, but I thought it was
mm,
trepidation about being up there.
mm,
But you didn't
mm.
look nervous, and I'm not trying to imply that there any of that shone through, but I could just feel like something a little bit different than what I've seen in other speakers. And that's what endeared me to that, to your talk even more, but also clearly the people that saw it, through our community.
Well, there's something that I've been trying to practice, and I'm not always good at it, and I'm human, and I make mistakes every day. But it's this sense that it doesn't matter who people are, they just want to know they're loved and it's going to be okay. And so,
Yeah.
regardless if you're going on the TED stage or you're heading to the hospital because your parents in the ICU, or you're going to the grocery store, or you're going to your kid's soccer game, we have soccer in common.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
it's just about, really, I call myself kind of a Buddhist and a Catholic. I was raised Catholic, Irish Catholic, and
I
I love
love that.
Catholicism in a lot of ways. And I also love the concepts of Buddhism, the Dalai
Yep.
Lama, but it's this sense of really losing the sense of self and the ego, and recognizing when we can do that, which it isn't easy. I'm not saying it's really easy. It's really, really hard because the voices that we hear every day are really strong. Those neural pathways are
Yep.
pretty intense from the way we're raised and our programming and how we're supposed to be in the world, the shoulds. But when you can start to drop those, and whatever techniques you do, whether it's meditation or exercise or prayer or journaling or therapy or yoga or knitting, whatever it is, Wordle, I love Wordle, um crossword puzzles, whatever it is, to drop out of the mind and get into the heart. You're such a more present and powerful person. And I love the quote, there's a Sufi saying that the head should be the servant to the heart. So it's not
Oh,
that you
I
let
love
go of the
that.
head, but you lead from the place of the heart. So whether that's on the TED stage, can I get out of my head and into my heart? Meeting the Dalai Lama, those are two big ones, probably the biggest ones in my life. Or sitting with a friend who's going through a challenging time, not fixing them, not solving their problem because you're uncomfortable right away, but really sitting with them and creating a container of space of love. Then that presence is more healing, I think, for people. And I know that personally too, than any other technique or medicine or prescription that we could be given. It's really about sitting in the heart and leading from the heart.
Is that something that you come by naturally? Is that something that you've had to learn throughout, your adult life? What really informed that sort of enlightenment for you?
I was raised in Omaha, Nebraska, in a large Irish Catholic family. I have four siblings and a really loving mom and dad. No childhood is perfect, but I was very, very fortunate to be raised in a really loving childhood. And there was a lot of heart. It wasn't necessarily like you have to be the smartest, you have to be the prettiest, you have to be the most athletic. It was really about, well, my dad had a saying, the harder you work, the luckier you get. And so we had
It's a
a
great
really
saying.
strong work ethic. And it was really about thinking of others before yourself. My mother was incredible with service. She'd drop off like lemon bars and chocolate chip cookies and get back in the kitchen to help people versus being out in the living room at the dinner party doing the dishes. So, I mean, I was really raised with heart. And then I've always had this deep, deep sense of curiosity. And that led me to leave the Midwest and go to school out west and then live in Barcelona and travel all over the world, India, South America, Ireland, Southeast Asia, and meeting so many different people in the world and knowing that our bubble can get really small. I mean, and when you think about a ripple, or my saying
Yeah.
cracking open, when you crack open, that light spreads far. When you push a stone in, that ripple can go so far. And to recognize that there's so many other people in the world with different perspectives and different ideas and different philosophies and different ways of living, that we can enter into those conversations, whether they're maybe intense or might be really interesting and inspiring, with the heart. So I think other cultures have taught me, my family of origin taught me, being a therapist for years and listening to thousands of stories of trauma or challenges, that really people want to be in the heart. So I think it's a combination of a lot of different areas of my life that have led me to really getting out of my head more and more and my ego more and more, and leading with the heart is really important.
I love that. For someone who might be hearing that, maybe that didn't grow up in a similar type of environment, or maybe doesn't find themselves in a naturally supportive environment today, how do you encourage them to find that heart? How do you encourage them to get back to, or maybe in some cases, maybe for the first time, to really tie into that? Because as you say it, it's like you can just feel like that's the purpose and that's the approach, and that makes a lot of sense. But a lot of people haven't experienced that, because of
Mhm.
their upbringing or because of the environments they've allowed themselves to be in, either personally or professionally. So how might you suggest someone really start down that path to get more familiar and recognize some of the true benefits of that?
Well, I'm going to tell your listeners to get out a pen and paper, because here's what I'm going to get into teaching mode and therapist mode. Because the first thing I'm going to tell them is it's not easy. And I don't care what people say. And I may make it sound really easy. I have my horrible days too, where I'm depressed and don't want to get out of bed, or I don't feel like I'm good enough, or I should be doing more. Did I hurt someone's feelings? So the first thing to know is you are not alone. Whoever is listening here, you are not alone. And the second thing to know is their change is definitely possible. I've been in mental health and education for 30 years. I've seen so much change, and what they need to know is they have agency over their own life, but it's them that has to get them out of the bed. It's not a therapist or a guru or a partner or $1 million in the bank or the perfect job or the perfect body. It's their heart, it's their soul, it's their driven, that they are like, okay, I want to change. So here's going to be some tips and tools that I have found that have really helped people. The first one is, we have these two things called our lungs that are probably one of the most powerful parts of our body. One, they surround the heart. Two, they're the place where we hold grief, right? So I think, I don't care, it's not necessarily death of a human being. It could be death of a job, death of your child going to college, death of your marriage ending, death of, and a white picket fence dwindling moment where you thought your life was going to look one way and it looks a very different way. So you've got to start with the lungs and the breath. It's free, it's simple, and it's always with you. There's a
Yeah.
technique called 4-7-9. Now, some people say 4-7-8, but I say 4-7-9. I like the number nine.
Okay.
And it gets you out of the sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight and flight response. And if you go into fight or flight, right, which we needed to do when we had to see a saber-toothed tiger, but we don't need to do when we get a bad email from work and our boss needs to see us or a kid is in trouble or whatever, right? We're not a
Yep.
saber-toothed tiger. And it takes, when you go into your sympathetic nervous system, if you do not do anything, you will stay there for 90 minutes. And that taps your adrenals and it causes stress on the body, which releases toxins, which could help, which causes people to get sick, really, really sick in many different ways. So 479 gets you out of the sympathetic and gets you into the parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest and digest. It's when the body knows it's safe. It's when the body knows it's going to be okay. It's when the body opens up to the heart and there's possibility and there's potential and there's hope. So you breathe in for four, sorry. You breathe in for 4, you hold for 7 seconds, and you breathe out for 9 seconds. You do 3 rounds.
Wow.
4, 7, 9. You can do it while you're driving to work or taking your kids to school or while you're in the shower. But I do it every single day. 4, 7, 9. Okay, that's the first thing. So then I can't get in my heart. I'm having a bad day. I'm too much in my head. Do 3 rounds of that. It will drop you right into your parasympathetic nervous system. The second thing
That's
is
awesome.
something I created called PAC. PAC. I love acronyms. Presence, awareness, and compassion. Everything is held in the body. I've read every book, not every book, but I've read a lot of books. I've talked to a lot of people on my podcast. I've seen a lot of people. We hold stuff in the body and we just act like it's a vessel that just can take it and take it and take it. And soon it starts to break down. We can't
Yep.
get out of bed. We have high blood pressure. We may get migraines. We may get more snappy and, indecisive with our loved ones. And so you've got to get into the body. So you get really present. You close your eyes. You get really present with the body and you just notice where you're feeling. So let's say, okay, I'm going to ask you, Steve, is there
Oh,
anything right now that's heavy on your heart?
yes.
Do you want to share? You don't have to share the whole
Uh,
story, but
und
just in general.
Yeah, no, it's a uncertainty about a particular business direction that, for one of my software companies about what I wanna do with it, whether I should stick it out or I should, you know, look to sell,
Fabulous. So when you sit with that, where do you feel the stress in your body?
right? I mean, you talk about the lungs, you're right in the middle of my chest. And when it strikes, it's like an elephant sitting on top of me, and it comes at the oddest times, at the weirdest moments. But most often it happens when in the middle of the night out of nowhere, right? Boom.
Yeah.
And then I'm insomniac and I'm up for the rest of the night.
So you get real present with that. We're just going to do it right now, and you start to look at it like you're like watching a movie. And you're like, oh, okay, so when it's right on the heart, what does it look like? A brick, a color? What is the substance that's laying on your heart? What does it look
It's
like
like a
when you sit?
bag of concrete. I mean,
Bag of
that's
concrete.
what I always
Fabulous. And
envision.
it's right on your heart, right? So when you
Yep.
start to you get present with it and you become aware of it, it's gonna get bigger. It's like a child is like, "Mom, can you get me a glass of water?" And you ignore them. They get
Yep.
louder. "Mom, can you
Yep.
get me a glass of water? Can you get me a glass of water?"
Yeah. Mine
It's the
morphs into an elephant that's just sitting right there.
Exactly, right? So it's this bag of concrete turning into an elephant because it really wants you to listen. So
Yep.
you pay attention to it, attention to it, attention to it, like you would a very loving child, because
Hmm.
it's a younger part of yourself that's coming up. We don't have to go too deep into your therapy, but
Yep.
and then the third thing you do, you've gotten real present with it. You become aware of what it looks like, concrete, an elephant. Now you bring compassion, the deepest level. You don't solve it. You don't come up with an answer. Should I sell it? Should I keep it? Should I go this direction? All you do is bring compassion to it. That may be a cup of tea. That may be loving words like, you're going to be okay, Steve. You are guided. You are loved. This is going to all work out. You have done such a good job in your life. You've worked so hard. The words of compassion. So when you think about compassion, what comes up for you?
Uh, for me, on around this situation is what you're asking, or just in general.
You got to bring compassion to it. No, around this situation.
somehow I always figure it out. I've resonated this year every time I feel like the stress is so overwhelming that all is well. I remind myself as much as I possibly can, and that everything is figure outable, right? It's kind of a
Yeah.
word that I just played with, but really at the end of the day, no matter what might be kicking off that stress or that, what has amped up my anxiety around it, being able to go back to that, I think, is my way of showing compassion, which does, for the most part, aside from when it happens in the middle of the night and I can't go back to sleep, and then I end up just going to the office until the gym opens. And that's my default. But really, at the end of the day, it does, when it happens, and it does, from time to time during the day, like, oh my God, this is so overwhelming. But then I remind myself to, I've always figured it out. I've always been
Yep.
able to come out on the other side. And if there is a problem that's presenting or bringing that stress, everything is figure outable.
It's perfect. So even just saying that now, you got present, you got aware, and you brought compassion. I mean,
Yeah.
on a scale of 1 to 10, maybe where was it before we did pack, and we didn't even really fully do it, but and where is it
Yeah.
now? Everything. What number? Where was that before we started?
I'd say as soon as you brought it up, it was an 8 plus probably. And now it would be a sub two, easy. Right. Yeah.
Exactly. So do you see? So you start with the breath, 4, 7, 9. You can do pack, presence, awareness, compassion. And the third thing I'm going to tell people who are listening, who are like, I am lost, I don't know where to go, what direction, is to remind themselves that courage comes from action. It doesn't work the other way around. It's not like you get courage all of a sudden, then you're motivated to do action. And I totally believe in, you got to feel to heal and you got to talk about your emotions. But then I know there's a moment where it's like you need to put one foot on the floor, the other foot on the floor out of bed, and you need to go for a walk. You need to call a friend. You need to clean your closet. You need to, Dan Siegel talks a lot about this. He's a neuroscientist,
Yeah.
and well, he's a psychiatrist actually, but he studies neuropsychology, and he calls it the river of integration. If we're flooding
Hmm.
in our right side of our brain, we're going to get too rigid. And if we're flooding in our left side of the brain, we're going to get too chaotic, right? Our emotional side and our logistical side. So you want to stay in the river of integration in the middle. And you want it, then you're going to be more balanced and grounded. So courage follows action. So you have agency. You need to do something to change this energy, the vibration, the pain that is in the body. And then from there, you will instantly feel better. I mean, it may not be like from a 10 to a 0, maybe from a 10 to a
Right.
9, but you have more motivation to move and to know that you're going to be okay and everything's figure outable. So those are some of my tips, those are my like tried
Oh,
and true trips I do day in and day out.
that's phenomenal. Thank you. I mean, that really is a gift for us. And for those that are watching or going to hear this on the podcast platforms, thank you so much for that. I mean, and that state change can be all that it can make all the difference, right? I mean, that is what you're really trying to do. And when you can see that you've had even just a minor movement, right? Like you said, from a 10 to a 9, it does give you the confidence to go, well, okay, this time I went from 10 to 9, but maybe next time I go from the 10 to 8 or 10 to 6 or wherever. And I think that's so amazing. And it gives you confidence. I can see myself using pack going forward and utilizing it to take on these situations that arise, that oftentimes are these weird, crazy stories we're making up in our own head about what's happening, in circumstances that haven't even, happened yet.
Well, and that reminds me, I interviewed Dr. Ellen Langer yesterday out of Harvard. She's been studying the mind body unity. She doesn't like the word mind body connection for 42 years at Harvard. And she has an amazing good book called The Mindful Body. And it's incredible. And it's all her research around how powerful the mind is to the body. And she has this quote that says, it's not about making the right decision, it's about making the decision right. Once you
Oh,
make the decision, make it right. So she uses this study where she says, all of our kids at Harvard are like, oh, you should have gone to Yale. She's like, you're Harvard or Yale, Harvard or Yale. So you go to Yale and you hate it and you think, oh, I made the wrong decision. You don't know that. You could have gone to Harvard and made the worst decision.
yep.
So you literally make decisions and make them right. And from that power around knowing that there's nothing wrong, she has virtually no stress. She said, I have virtually no stress because I'm so mindful, which she defines as being very present in every moment and noticing what's going on around you and being in that space versus thinking so much about the future or the past. And it's different than mindfulness and it's different than thinking.
Yeah.
It's a noticing around that's really important. So her work's
Wow.
incredible. The Mindful Body, if I mean all these people that I love, I'd tell all your listeners to go out and get her book. It's changed my life.
Well, I definitely am going to put that on my reading list for sure. But I would encourage our listeners to get your two books, which we're going to talk about here in just a second first, and then get that book because I want you to be able to have an opportunity to share a little bit about the motivation and inspiration behind writing them. You used a term though I want to go back to that I think maybe my audience wouldn't necessarily be familiar with. So maybe you could define it. But what does agency mean?
Mm. Agency means that you have choice in your life.
I love that.
We often think that we don't have choice, that life is controlling us. Now, things are going to happen in our life that we don't have control over. I didn't want my parents to die young. I didn't want a good friend of mine to die from cancer at a young age. I didn't want my husband's startup to fail. Like there's a lot of things that have happened in my life. I didn't want to have postpartum with my children. Like there's so many things I didn't want to have happen, but I knew somewhere deep down in my inside of me, and it's for me, it's in the belly. It's my gut, right? I wrote a book on
Yeah.
intuition. It's like that core wound, that core part of myself, not necessarily a core wound, but that core part of myself that knows that I have choice over how I live my life every single day. And so that's agency. There is such
Mm.
a power of potential. There is so much more. I mean, I love studying human performance and people who do these amazing feats and things like that. And I'm just watching them or researching that this sense of agency of like what could asking your listeners today. And it's not like you have to become a Pulitzer Prize winner or run a marathon or become famous. It's not that. It's like asking yourself every day, how do I want to live today?
Oh,
What is my heart leading me today? I do it every morning. I call it my intuition prayer. I wake up and I say, show me what I need to see. Let me hear what I need to hear. Let me see what I need to see and let me meet who I want to meet. I am in your guidance and I follow that. And sometimes I have to make left or right, or Dr. Ellen Langer, I make decisions and I make those decisions. It's not about making the right decisions, by making the decisions right. But it's really around knowing that, the people listening today, that you do have agency over your own life. You have choice.
oh,
And it could be
that's
very,
great.
I call it turtle steps. They could be very small steps each day, or Martha Beck
Well,
calls it 1% pivoting, 1% pivot. You know, you just make these small changes, but they soon add up to big transformations in people's lives.
oh, I love that. Well, you touched on intuition, and I'm curious for my own purposes, right? How do you know when you should follow when your intuition is telling you one thing, and that's not just the story in your mind saying something, right? Like how do you know when to really follow that intuition?
Mm.
When
It's
it's
a
legit and true.
it's a really, really hard question to answer, and I get it a lot because obviously it makes sense. The first thing I would say is it's the number one thing around intuition that I love is it forces you to really get to know yourself on a deeper level. The other thing it does is it also helps you know that a lot of what you need to do in your life is inside of you. We are very quick to look outside of ourselves to have people tell us how we should live our life.
Yep.
Now, if you have good morals and ethics and values, and you're following a good path in life, and you know you're a good person and you're making good decisions, then you really have a lot of the resources inside of you. So, what I would say is it's kind of like a muscle. Everyone has a strong intuition. Babies come into the world. They don't ask if they can go to the bathroom. They don't ask if they can cry. They don't ask if they can grab the spoon from their mom's hand. They just do it. They
Yeah.
don't ask permission. They don't think about if it's good or bad. And then we get really programmed. And I call it our emotional backpack. We're all born with like a really light backpack. And then life puts things in it, right? Programming, education, how you should be, how you should look, and it gets the backpack gets heavier, and these instincts as a baby, this deep intuition of knowing what we should do, gets clouded. It gets confused. So just finding ways that you know you're at peace, finding ways that you know you're grounded so that you can see clarity, then you make the decision. So, for example, I'm in LA right now, and I made the decision to come to LA within 2 hours. Sunil wrote me and said, "Hey, I'm having an event in LA in Santa Monica on Wednesday night. Can you come?" And I didn't say yes right away, even though it sounded exciting and fun, and I can go to LA and do some work and meet some people. I like stopped. I went for a little walk. I took a shower. I really thought I looked at my schedule. I mean, I had 3 podcasts this week. I had work, my kids. Is it feasible? And then I said yes.
Yeah.
And then I said yes. I followed my intuition. Even though I knew the first answer was yes, I checked all my boxes before. So I would say the 3 things I would tell people is to really get to know themselves on a deeper level, know that they have a lot of the wisdom inside of themselves, and stop looking outward for people. It doesn't mean you don't have mentors and you don't ask for advice. And the third thing is to take the time to really reflect on whether this is a good decision or not for you. And it may come within my decision to come to LA came in maybe 30 minutes. And sometimes it takes 30 days to follow your intuition. Yeah. I would also say
That's
there's also
phenomenal.
another thing I say is like look for a sign. Because believe it or not, there's little signs where there's like a lot of people signing up for my coaching program. I have a coaching program for women. I have actually one coming up starting April 3rd, and I have one spot left where we're going to work for 3 months on getting unstuck, how you're stuck in your life and how do you get unstuck. So when people are thinking about signing up for it, I say look for an egg, look for a cracked egg. Someone may, something comes up, there's a sign. So I do believe there's signs everywhere that show us directions too on decisions to make.
I do too. And the more cognizant that you are of them, and when you look for them, they just show up, right? And they're like, God, maybe these were here all along. I should have been looking a lot deeper. But I love how you frame that. That's phenomenal. So you wrote 2 books. Tell us a little bit about those books.
The first book is called Cracking Open, and it's around self transformation, and it's an artistic journal. And I've always journaled. It's kind of been, I've gone to therapy and I'm a therapist, but it's also been a huge piece of my therapy. I love waking up, getting a cup of coffee, and journaling. So I was journaling
I
one
love it.
day, and I live in Bend, Oregon, and I was journaling one day to like a local Starbucks, and I thought this book could be for everyone. We all feel lost sometimes. We all want to feel
Yep.
free. We all want to have agency over our own life, And so I made it, and it took me 7 years to write it. 7 years because I self published, which is a whole nother story. I
Yeah.
did all the font, all the artwork. It's a
Good for
journal,
you.
all
That's awesome.
yeah, I mean, I designer helped me a little bit with it, and then I published it through like I had a printing press out of San Francisco named Blurb. They do beautiful work, print it. So I
Oh,
spent a
great.
lot of my time and resources on printing it because I wanted a great quality book, and I put it out in the world. And it's just been something that's really been helpful for a lot of people. I run retreats all over the world on it. My company's called Cracking Open Inc. or Molly Carroll Inc., but Cracking Open is part of what it's about. And when Cracking Open came out, Amazon found it and they wrote me and said, "Hey, do you want to publish a book with us?" But I just come out with it. And I was like, no, it's like a baby. I was like, no, I
Yep.
need to market this and give time for it and not rush into the next thing, following my intuition, right? Because my mind would have said, oh my God, Amazon's here and I should write another book.
Got to do it. Got to do it. Yeah,
Got to do it.
absolutely.
And I said no. And then, and it's, so I just kind of did it and I did retreats around it and I worked with companies. That's where I went to Apple and LinkedIn and did some work with it with other companies. And then about a year afterwards, Amazon said, if you're ever in New York, give us a call. And so I was in New York and I said, I'm coming to New York. And they said, okay, can we have a meeting? And so we had a meeting and I showed up in the room. And as a woman, I have to say, it was all women at the boardroom. Not that I don't love men and I don't appreciate men, but when you're in a group of women at a big company and then I just followed, I didn't want to get anything out of the meeting. And I think that's really important for people
Yeah.
listening because even on the TED stage, it's really hard to get out of the ego mind of wanting, we want something. We want to get people to sign up for my coaching program. I want to get someone to notice me or I want to, and instead come from the lens of giving. How do I give something? How do I show up at this meeting authentic and just have a conversation with these people?
I mean,
And
that's our
so I
whole
did.
philosophy with the ripple, taking those actions, creating those positive actions without expectation of return. If you ripple out enough, it ripples back to you.
It makes total sense. And so we sat in the meeting, and in the meeting, they offered me a book contract, and I got my agent the same day. And so I wrote it. And my second book is
Wow.
called Trust Within, Letting Intuition Lead. And they only give me 11 weeks to write it, though. I had a full private practice. I had 2 kids. And I mean, talk about anyone who has a passion project right now. I'm telling you, it's about sitting your butt in the chair and doing it. There is no
Yep.
glamour in being a writer. None.
No.
None.
Zero.
It's so much work, and you have to have the passion and the deep pull, but it's just like the magnetic thing of like, get your butt in the chair. I had 60,000 words. I divided it by 7 weeks, and I wrote like 1,500 words a day. And I just
Wow.
got really methodical about it and checked off the list. And then, yeah, my second book came out from Amazon, which was great, around intuition, called Trust Within, because I really believe a lot of our wisdom is within ourselves.
I love it. I definitely encourage everybody that hears this to go get those books. I mean, I'm so thoroughly impressed and love the backstory behind both of those, which is fantastic. And obviously, the first one led to your podcast, right? Can you talk about the podcast? Cracking Open Podcast. I have to say, I have just started listening after you and I had our first conversation, but I love your interview style. I love the approach that
Oh,
you take, and quite honestly, I was a little nervous interviewing you because you're like a pro at this. And I'm like, well, I don't know if I can measure up. But the episodes that really stood out to me, Wade Davis, How to Become the
mm.
Architect of Your Life. What a great way to kick off the year. And then Emily Paulson's The Truth About MLM and Alcohol Use. Actually, that episode became a real pivot point for me because I shared it with someone that needed that resource. And so the ripple that you are creating continues, right? So thank you for that. But tell us a little bit about the podcast.
Well, thank you so much for that. And before I forget, and I keep talking about the podcast, the other one, if you want to do about addiction or whatever, is Brian Burns. His
Oh,
is
okay.
amazing. He's a producer, and Ed Burns' brother. And his is so heartfelt and so amazing. And I mean, I have to say, I love every single one of them. And it's not because it's my podcast,
Yep.
it's because the people that come on and share their stories, because it's all revolved around one question: what was your cracking open moment of your life, and how did it change you forever? No, I just don't always get to the question, but we usually talk about the cracking open moment. So yeah, so everything's just since I started the book. My coaching program is called Cracking Open. It's after the Leonard Cohen quote, "When there's a crack, the light gets in." I totally
Yep.
believe we need to crack in life. It's not comfortable, it's not always easy, but it ultimately brings the light. And so sometimes you need to call the light in, sometimes it lets the light out, but the cracking is really important. So I've always loved stories, and as a therapist, for God, now how long have I been a therapist? I graduated in graduate school 99, 2002. So 20 years I've been a therapist. Storytelling is so powerful. So
Yep.
powerful. And I love podcasts. I listen to podcasts every day. It's definitely my medium of choice. I love to read, but I really love podcasts. And so I thought, I'm just going to start it. I mean, that's honestly, there's no magic bullet. I just tell anyone listening, just start it. Take a little step. I started every one of my businesses by taking a little step. I didn't get overwhelmed by all the things I need to do. It's just like buy a microphone, look into your platform, Buzzsprout, find one guest, maybe download a program that tells you a little bit about it, maybe ask some people questions, but that's it.
Yep.
And then start and start.
And then you
So
do it.
yeah,
Yep.
I just did it and just started it, and it's really rippled. Like, it's been great. I did 2 interviews this week. I interviewed Dr. Ellen Langer, like I said, and Elise Lumen, who is an amazing woman who wrote a book called On Our Best Behavior, just this week. And I met a woman in a coffee shop today in Venice, California, who's I loved her coat. So I was like, I
Yeah.
never stop people. What's that coat? And she's like, I'm a fashion designer, but she had a great cracking open story around losing her father. So it's really just um, it's been I've loved everything I've done, but I do think the podcast is something that's gonna be around for a while. I
Well,
hope.
you're great at it, and
Thank
you have had some
you.
amazing guests, people that I would not have known otherwise. So thank you for that. As a listener, I'm truly grateful for the amazing people that you're shining a light on their work, and that's what I intend to do with this podcast as well. And I'm sure you can appreciate this. I find that when I get an opportunity to meet such amazing people like yourself, it's like I'm getting a master class, because I get to do the interview and I get to hear this amazing stuff. So I feel like even though I'm bringing it to my audience, I'm really selfishly like doing it because I get to meet so many amazing, cool people like you. So,
Yeah, I
and
feel the
thanks for
same way.
being here.
I'm
I mean,
right
it's
at you.
so
I'm on the other
great.
side. I agree. I agree. I agree. I feel very lucky. Thank you for
I
saying that to
love
me.
it. Well, so we'll definitely have links to your podcast in the books for sure. I want to shift gears. I always finish up these interviews with what I call ripple connection questions. I like your one big question because you take that so many different directions. But ripple connection questions are just kind of fun questions to ask, fun to answer, and they're really kind of give a little bit of additional insight to who you are as an individual. So the first one I'd ask is, what did 7-year-old Molly want to be when she grew up?
Mm. I wanted to be an actress. I was on
Really?
stage. I was in plays, and so it's not shocking that I'm still on stage. Yeah, I loved being in front of people, connecting with people on a deeper level or more vulnerable level. And when you're on stage, you really have to be vulnerable. So I think my
Would that be a
7-year-old self went.
play actress or would you be like in movies or both?
I think it was when I was younger. I was on stage, so I was in a little
Okay.
theater in Omaha, Nebraska. So stage, because that's now I'm still on stages. So I had some
Yep.
speak on stages. So yeah, an actor.
Oh, that's awesome. What is your superpower? Being a
My
soccer mom,
favorite.
I know that one for.
I love a soccer mom. Don't even get me started. I was hoping you'd ask one of my favorite things in the world to do, and it's to go to my son's soccer games, hands
Well,
down.
all right, we're
With my
touching that. I
daughters,
love that.
anything with my kids, I will drop everything to be with my children. My kids are anything.
Yep.
Okay, what was the question again? Now look at me,
What
my
is your
brain.
superpower? Being
Oh,
super
it's a
mom,
superpower.
apparently.
I don't know about that. I'd ask my kids that question. They're 18 and 16. I would say my superpower is my husband actually has a quote that says, Molly will learn more about someone in an elevator ride that I've known for 20 years. So I think I have a way of deeply connecting to people and being curious and letting them be seen, like connecting beneath the surface to the heart. So something around that. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, just in our time when we were talking about getting this scheduled, I mean, our conversation, I felt totally like that. So, I mean, it is
Mm.
definitely a superpower. Who inspired you to be the person you are today? Is there anybody specific that stands out?
Two people. Can I say two?
Sure, of course.
My mother, and we didn't always have the perfect relationship, but we really really loved each other, and she was a force of love, a force of faith, and a force of loving her children. And she really inspired me. And Oprah, I know a lot of people say it, but I literally started watching Oprah when I was like 6 years old or 7 years old.
Yep.
I'd come home from school and most kids would want to go play outside with their friends. And I would watch Oprah Winfrey and watch these older women talk about menopause and their affairs. And I mean, it was crazy, but
Yep.
she really inspired me to follow my heart and to talk about hard topics, to crack
Yeah.
open and not be afraid to bring light to the dark. I mean, as a Jungian, I'm a Jungian psychotherapist, and we talk about the shadow side. Jung believed there's a shadow side. We all have these dark parts of ourselves, but if they're not illuminated, we
Yep.
suffer. So it's really about illuminating the dark parts of life, and then you become whole. So Oprah and my mom would be the two
I
people that
love
inspire.
that. And I love the word that you used for your mom in three instances, force. She was a force. I love that. It just really tells you something about her, which I think is great. And I mean, you met the Dalai Lama. Have you met Oprah?
No, I haven't met Oprah. I know
Maybe
a
you
lot of
should
people
put
that
that
know
out
her.
there. I mean, you
I
seem to
have like
make
a
those
one,
things happen.
6 degrees of separation. I'm now at a one, but no, I really believe in timing. I really believe in timing, and I don't reach out to people till I really feel like it's time.
Yeah.
And I really respect people's boundaries. And I really believe in, everyone says the universe or God or whatever. I believe in divine timing. And so when
Yep.
something, or if I'm supposed to meet her, she's supposed to cross my path in this lifetime, she will. And if she's won't, she's taught me enough. It's okay. I'm wearing her
I
color, her
love it.
favorite color, purple. I didn't even know it's color purple.
I love it. Well, I'd love to say she was a fan of this podcast and I would be able to ripple that for you, but I'm not aware. She could be, maybe. We'll see.
You
But
never know.
it'd be great if you guys cross paths. Your work is super intense. What you do. How do you unwind? What does Molly do to
Mm,
blow off steam?
okay. I love to run. I love nature. I love to be out in nature. I run, I walk. I spend as much time as I can in nature. I wrote my master's thesis on the healing aspects of trees. So I unwind in nature. I love my infrared sauna and plunging. So I'm a plunger. I know it's very like,
Yep, me too.
everyone's doing it now, but it really is a game changer for me. So, and I go into the river, and where I live, it's very cold, but I go into the river for 3 minutes. I do my infrared sauna almost every day. I love
Wow,
puzzles. I'm obsessed by puzzles. And spending time with my family and friends. I mean, I have friends that I still have from childhood.
that's
I
awesome.
keep, someone said, once you're in Molly's womb, you're always in Molly's womb. So I keep a lot of people close. So those are my really, it's pretty simple. I'm a pretty simple person, believe it or not. I love big
Yeah,
inspirations and I love
yeah.
meeting inspiring people. That's why I'm in Los Angeles right now because I'm doing some really cool things with cool people, but interesting people. But my day to day life is very simple. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. What's the best thing in your mind about being an entrepreneur?
Mm, freedom. I
Yeah,
have always wanted to be free as a child, even when I was a little girl. And when you're an entrepreneur, you are free.
that's a
Mhm.
great answer, and I agree wholeheartedly. What's the hardest thing in your mind about being an entrepreneur?
Loneliness. It can be lonely.
It can be. Yep.
Yeah, everything lies on you. So if you don't create it, it doesn't happen. If you don't get the customer, you don't make the money or do the sale. If you fail, you fail. You know, and so it can get lonely. I mean, I have some of my wonderful people that work with me. I have 4 people that work with me that I would not. I live and die for them. And they're all part of the Cracking Open community, and all the women that I've worked with and all the men really support me. But it can get lonely.
Yeah, it's I mean, a lot of people don't recognize that. Well, recognize this: if you ever feel lonely or stuck or frustrated or angry, or you just need somebody to unload on, I'm a fellow entrepreneur and I open myself to you. So I am
Thank
always going
you,
to be a resource to
Steve.
you.
That's so kind of you to say, Steve. Thank you. I will
Well,
definitely take you up on your
appreciate
offer.
Yeah, well,
Get
yeah,
ready.
I would appreciate the opportunity. It's I know how it
Oh,
is. It can be incredibly isolating and frustrating,
yeah.
and especially when things don't go the way that you expect them to, and you thought you had it. There's not a lot of people on your team or the people that work for you or support you that they don't recognize how much you put into that, and how
Mhm.
much of a letdown some things can be.
It's
So
so true. It's
think
so
it's
true.
important entrepreneurs support one another. So that's, part of the ripple. Create that, that mindset around other entrepreneurs. What is if you were going to put out a piece of advice to anybody who is listening, like, what
Mm.
would that be? Like if that was on a billboard, that everybody could see every single day, what would be the best advice you could give someone?
It's the thing I say. It's the foundation of everything I built. Is that for people to know that you are not alone. I think loneliness, as we know, it's an epidemic. It's what I did my TED
Yep.
talk on. It's more detrimental to your health and your well being than smoking, obesity, and high blood pressure. More people die from loneliness than those things. It's definitely an epidemic right now. And I think for people to know you're not alone, and it takes so much courage sometimes to reach out to people, but remember, courage is followed by action. Pick up the phone if you're struggling. Go reach out to a stranger on the street. Do service. Do something for someone else. You instantly will feel better, and you'll instantly feel like you are not alone, that you can get through this journey, this life that we call it Earth School, the
Yep.
school of life we raised in community. And you're not alone.
Oh, I love that. My last two questions. What does the ripple effect mean to you?
I would say it's everything to me because I'm such a believer. It's one of the reasons why I said yes to being on your podcast too, is that we don't know where one time I'll share a little story. When I was like, I don't know, it was probably 10, 15 years ago. I was living overseas. I lived in Barcelona, Spain for 2 years. And I went to a coffee shop and I was journaling and I drew all these little stones. I'm Irish, right? And so these little cobblestone streets of, like, think of Ireland or Europe, somewhere
Yeah.
old. And every step, like being raised in Omaha, ripple, put the stone in, ripple. Going to school in Arizona, ripple, you know, um, moving to Barcelona, ripple, meeting this friend, losing that boyfriend, ripple, 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 ripple. Every ripple is leading you to your next ripple. So don't judge it so much as good or bad or right or wrong. Just trust the process, and that these ripples are taking you somewhere and leading you to another path, either to another human being or to a job or a relationship or something. But it feels very important in life to trust that these the stones you put in the world are dropping in the water. They're
Yeah.
rippling out somewhere. You may not be able to see it because the ripple may end somewhere and you can't see the end. But it is the vibration of that and the movement of that is going and taking you in the right direction.
Oh, what a phenomenal answer. Thank you for that. That is just amazing. Well, last question. What ripple can I create for you?
Share about my coaching program.
Okay. You got it. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say I take very few people. It's completely transformational. I'm now doing it like time by time. I used to like have a bunch set up. I don't know how many more I'm going to do.
Yeah.
So this next one is going to be all about helping people get unstuck. And people need community, and it's around four pillars: around awareness, we are stuck somewhere; accountability, you need someone to keep you accountable; consistency, kind of James Clear work, on a
Yeah.
habit
Yeah.
changing; and then community. And so it's
Love it.
really powerful thing. So I would just say share about my coaching program. You can find it on my website, molly-carroll.com.
Well, I was just going to ask you, how do you want people to follow you and learn more about your work? And
Yeah,
so,
they can get me on Instagram, Molly
mollycarroll.com.
Carroll Inc. They can find me on Facebook, Molly Carroll. They can come to my website. They can DM me. I'm pretty accessible.
Yeah.
And I try to get back to people as soon as I can. So yeah, I would say just find me that way. They can Google my name and things will come up so they can find me.
I love it. And, I am just so truly honored to know you. And you have, in a short period of time since we've started connecting, you've been so gracious in the communication. You've been so willing to step up and help. And I just want to say thank you. I really do.
Oh,
I'm really truly blessed to know you. And like I said, when we were on the call the other day, you're stuck. I mean, you got a friend here. So you and I are going to, have to find some ways to maybe work together or do something, because I'm so inspired by your work and so appreciative of just the presence that you have and the kinds of ripples that you're creating out there in the world. And the world needs more Molly Carrolls. So, I mean,
oh,
I love that you are doing what you're doing through your programs, through your books, and through your podcasts. The work is really making a difference. And I'm so grateful that I found your TED Talk and that we're having this conversation today.
me too. Thank you, Steve, so much. I'm so grateful. It's lovely meeting you, and I'll probably see you in Austin sometime soon.
Please, yes, hit me up. I mean, we've got lunch or dinner for sure. But guys, we'll be back again with another episode. But please check out all the links that we're going to include on this episode to check out Molly's work. Follow her; she is amazing, as you already know and have experienced. Get the books, subscribe to her podcast, and you'll be blown away. She's just you definitely need this in your life. So you guys go out there, make a difference in the world, make a difference in someone's life, and create some positive ripples like Molly's doing. And as always, ripple on. Molly, take care. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you.